Hi guys, so I'm just going to give you some brief information about the experience section of your LinkedIn profile. Now, if you've ever written a resume, you know what the experience section looks like on that. And you would often list everything you did at that job, every experience you had at a job, like Publix, right? You bagged groceries, you handled cash, you dealt with customers, so on and so forth. A LinkedIn experience section is much more interested in your accomplishments, your achievements, and what stands out about that job. And you would spend a lot less time on a LinkedIn page talking about the obvious things that you did. So for example, if I can guess that you handled cash and bagged groceries at Publix, you're not going to spend a lot of time on your LinkedIn profile explaining that. Instead, you would spend time explaining that you were promoted to manager, or you would spend time explaining that you were in charge of a really big initiative to reorganize something, that you volunteered through this organization doing something. You're basically going to list your major achievements, your major sort of life-changing things that you did at this job that are not obvious, right? What would you have that not every Publix employee has? So not just what did you do at Publix, but what did you do at Publix that is different even from other people who worked at Publix? And also keep in mind, how does that affect the job you're applying for? So if you're applying for an engineering job, for example, you have Publix as your job experience, what did you do at Publix that would be interesting to me who wants to hire you for a job as an engineer, right? And so if you say that you went up the ladder, you got promoted, that you were in charge of this and that you got employee of the month, that is much more interesting to me than I bagged groceries, which is obvious because you worked at Publix, right? It would be much more interesting to me that you were this really stellar employee, and that's going to help you get the job through the LinkedIn profile. If you've done a resume, you know that usually a resume is like a list of bulleted points, responsibilities included, bagging groceries, handling money, so on and so forth. LinkedIn, you can use bullet points, but there's going to be a lot less of them because you're going to focus on your major accomplishments, achievements, and all of that. But you don't have to list it as a list. You can list it in a list, but separate it by commas instead of bullet points, okay? And that's okay. You're going to definitely focus on your strengths, whether you got promoted, if it's important, what kind of customers you served. You can also be a lot more descriptive with your language on LinkedIn. So you can say that I was a manager at Forever 21. Or you could say something much more descriptive like, I was the manager in charge of scheduling and customer complaints. And then go over your major achievements as manager. But you can be descriptive with your titles. You can be really descriptive with your language about what you achieved to really sell yourself to the person that you're applying to, okay? You want to use as many keywords as possible. So when people are looking for you on LinkedIn, or looking for people who might work for them, they're going to search for a certain number of keywords. One good indication of the keywords that job might use is literally listed on the job ad. So let's say you look at the job ad and it says we want A, B, and C. And maybe you do have A, B, and C, but you didn't use the same words to describe it as they did. You're not going to come up when they search for you. So you need to try to use the language that the people who are looking for you are using. Okay, so you really want to look at the job ad closely, pay very close attention to the language the job ads are using to describe your skills, and try to use those exact phrases as much as possible on your LinkedIn profile, okay? You also want to link the past in terms of your work experience to the present. So let's say you're studying pre-law, you want to work in a law firm, but the experience you have before now is not from a law firm, it's from working in retail. You really need to think about what accomplishments you're going to list from working in retail and how that's going to sell you to someone who's interested in hiring you in a law firm. Okay, and so when you're thinking about what keywords do I hit, what achievements do I want to hit, what strengths do I want to hit, you really got to think about that personal brand. You have to sell yourself as someone who is perfectly suited to working in a law firm. Whereas if you are not careful, you will actually describe yourself who is perfectly suited to working in retail. Because your experience is in retail, you're spending a lot of time describing retail skills, and you are not spending a lot of time explaining those in ways that are obviously transferable to law school work. So you really, really need to think about how you are describing yourself. So back to that Publix example, if I describe myself as someone who's really good at bagging groceries and dealing with angry customers, and then I'm trying to sell myself as an engineer, somebody who looks at that's going to say, but like, what kind of engineering can she do? What kind of engineering can he do? Whereas if I describe that same Publix experience just to focus on my problem solving, how good of an employee I was, because I got employee of the month and then I was promoted, even though I was the youngest person who worked there, then I can say, oh, okay, well, this Publix job doesn't have very many engineering skills, but it does show that she is a really good employee, and that will transfer to working in a law firm or in engineering or whatever, okay? If you did learn any skills that translate, you would definitely want to highlight those, okay? So, for example, a lot of times students who want to be engineers do have some construction experience, which is not the same thing, but maybe you did learn some engineering skills at your construction job, and you would definitely want to highlight those because you want to make everyone think that you are an engineer in training, a law student in training. Whatever you are, you want to build your personal brand around that. Make every single word on that LinkedIn profile and your resume paint you as the perfect person for this job, okay? You also want to think about the order you put things in. The most impressive stuff has to come first, and you also want to use really strong verbs to describe what you did, right? So managed. Your book has a list of really good verbs that are good to use. Like you, instead of saying my responsibilities included or duties included, which waters down what you're saying, think about how to front load a verb like I was promoted to, I managed, I achieved, and use these really strong verbs. And always within each job, place the most impressive thing about that job first, because people are always going to skim and they're always going to get the first things they read, more of that, right? So they kind of fade out as they read. So you want them to get the most important information first, okay? And you do need to check for grammar. You need to check for grammar. Not only because this is a written document and professionalism matters, but professionalism matters. If your LinkedIn profile resume is filled with grammatical errors, that sends the message to future employers that you are sloppy, that you do not take the time to take care of small details like grammar. So if your profile is very well written with no typos and just clearly well edited, that alone helps your professional brand, and it helps send the message that you are a person who takes time to do things correctly. And that is something that will very much help your professional brand. Whenever you're writing this experience section, just keep in mind, what are other people who do not know me think of me based on what I am writing? So you are not trying to throw in every single detail of everything you've ever done. You are trying to think about, what kind of picture can I paint of who I am as an employee? And again, I said this at the beginning, but let me reiterate, focus on concrete things. So one example, a way to explain this concrete thing too, I just thought of that might help is, if you are a computer programmer, you do not want to say things like, I programmed, right? Because they know that. You want to say what you programmed. What did you create by programming at this job that you're describing, right? If you want to say you were promoted to what and why is that important, right? What does that show about you? Well, I was promoted to X after only working there 2 months and I was the youngest employee is a lot more impressive than I was promoted. I programmed this really impressive program application, and I did it on a team of 3, and we sold 1,000 copies, whatever. So you're going to focus on details to show your achievements and not throw around empty words either. So you don't want a profile that says you're hardworking and you're responsible and you're whatever in these words without actually showing concrete examples of how you did that, when you did that, what did you accomplish specifically. Okay, and this applies to all the not just the experience section of your LinkedIn, like your job experience, but experience can mean any experience. Okay, so did you work somewhere where you learned this? Did you learn this in a class? Did you learn this on your own? Did you teach yourself this? Did you learn this in a volunteer experience? You can get experience anywhere. Okay, so a lot of like students who are into IT and computers, for example, they often teach themselves this, or they sometimes build a program in their free time. But if you built that program in your free time, it's still experience building a program, right? So think about your experience broadly and think about your personal brand, use concrete language, and always lead with the most impressive information, okay? You're going to write a draft, I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to help you improve it. But as always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.